Lu Xuancheng is a bandit chieftain commanding 200,000 troops. My imperial brother, desperate to seize his military power, forced me to marry him as his plaything. All watched the spectacle unfold, expecting me to be toyed with until I perished. Yet none knew that marrying Lu Xuancheng was my own choice. On our wedding night, I straddled Lu Xuancheng, urging him to hurry. Gritting his teeth, he growled, "You want me dead beneath you, don't you?" I idly toyed with his lifeline, watching his face flush crimson. I asked him, "Look, if my brother can sit on that imperial throne, can't I too?" Main text: the biting wind whipped snowflakes like razors across the towering wooden gates of Blackwind Fortress. The wedding carriage halted before the fortress entrance, barred from proceeding further. Just as I was about to ask the maid, "Qing Yu, what's going on?" a rough hand violently ripped open the heavy carriage curtain. A bitter cold wind instantly poured in, sending shivers down everyone's spine. Qing Yu immediately shielded me with her body, shouting, "How dare you!" Outside the carriage, a dense crowd blocked the entrance. Each rugged face bore undisguised malice and the look of spectators anticipating a spectacle. A man spoke up, his voice carrying the characteristic brutality of the mountain bandits. "The rule of Blackwind Fortress: the bride must walk barefoot along this path of purity. From this gate, all the way to the Hall of Brotherhood. Let the ice and snow upon this ground wash away the pampered air from her body." I recognized instantly that they were trying to humiliate me. Qing Yu's tears fell instantly. Turning to me, she cried, "Princess, how can this be? In this bitter cold and snow, how can your body endure it? They're deliberately trying to humiliate you." Her voice was soft, yet piercingly clear in the silent snowy night. I raised my hand, gently pressing it against her icy wrist, patting it soothingly. The veil obscured my eyes, no one could see what I was thinking. Truthfully, I had already lived this life once before. I was originally Xuancheng, the eldest princess. My mother, the imperial consort Chen, was cherished above all by the emperor. My elder brother, Yu, held the secure position of second prince. Within the palace walls, our branch of the family had once enjoyed stability and favor. Yet the vortex of imperial power never bends to human will. Besides my brother and me, the emperor had two other sons. But last year, a sudden cold struck the crown prince, born to the empress, and he passed away abruptly. Consumed by grief, the empress dowager followed him in death. Overnight, the throne was left vacant. Now, the only contenders are my brother and the third prince, Xuancheng, born to consort Xu. Over the years, the emperor's health has steadily declined, and the political winds in the court have long since shifted. The rivalry between my brother and the third prince, both overt and covert, is discussed even by the old eunuchs by the palace walls. Yet everyone knows Xuancheng is backed by the Marquis of Jingua, the maternal clan of consort Xu. With military power in hand and a network of entrenched influence, seizing the crown prince's position from him would be as difficult as scaling the heavens. Half a year ago, barbarian tribes on the frontier suddenly broke their treaty and invaded. But the imperial treasury was already depleted, and the capital's imperial guards were inadequate for the task. Court officials understood this presented a golden opportunity. Whichever side, the crown prince or Xuancheng, could quell the rebellion would claim the crown prince's title. The crown prince's weakness was glaringly obvious. He possessed strategy but lacked troops. That was until he discovered Lu Xuancheng of Blackwind Ridge. Lu Xuancheng, a bandit chief feared throughout the martial world, commanded an elite force of 200,000 soldiers. Entrenched in the lawless Blackwind Ridge, his forces outnumbered those of some border commanders. My brother clung to this like a lifeline, fixated on bringing this power under his command. But Lu Xuancheng had forged this army through fire and blood. Would he ever submit so easily? Yet my brother refused to believe it. He planned to use force to attack Blackwind Ridge. In my past life, to find someone to aid him, he and my mother drugged me and sent me to the bed of the brutal Duke of Dingbei. Though the Duke aided my brother, he spent our marriage tormenting me with every cunning scheme. On the brink of death, it was Lu Xuancheng who rescued me from the Marquis' estate. Only then did I learn he was the youth I'd once saved by chance during an outing from the palace. Later, to avenge me, he orchestrated the annihilation of the entire Dingbei Marquis clan. Yet he himself perished in the process. Now, reborn into this life, it was I who begged my mother and brother to let me marry Lu Xuancheng. My rebirth coincided with my brother's deep distress over Lu Xuancheng's affairs. Kneeling before my brother and mother, I pleaded earnestly. Lu Xuancheng is but a bandit leader, all he seeks is wealth and glory. I, Yao, am willing to marry him bearing gold, silver, and jewels, solely to ease your burdens, brother and mother. Though Lu Xuancheng was a bandit leader, he still had to consider his men. Marrying a princess would signal the court's approval and bring them honor. For the sake of all Blackwind Ridge, he couldn't refuse. As for my mother and my imperial brother, sacrificing myself to secure my brother's glory and wealth, I would gladly do so. Thus, upon hearing this, my mother rejoiced, "My dear child, I shall prepare the most lavish dowry for you." My brother also said, "Io, I know this is a hardship for you. But when I ascend to the Eastern Palace one day, I shall pledge the entire dynasty to protect you. You shall never suffer the slightest injustice." I sneered inwardly. What I desire could never be limited to these things alone. The moment I set foot on Blackwind Ridge's soil, I knew this game of chess was about to begin. Yet I never imagined that upon arriving here, I would actually be humiliated. But in my past life, Lu Xuancheng loved me most of all. If he knew it was me marrying him, would he still allow these people to treat me with such contempt? Qingyu still stood before me, indignant on my behalf. I gently pushed her aside. "It matters not. Since it is Blackwind Ridge's custom, it must be followed." Without a moment's hesitation, I pulled back the veil, bent low, and slipped out of the carriage, shedding my fox fur robe as I went. The cold wind instantly enveloped me. The wedding gown was thin, utterly inadequate against the chill. Yet I steadied myself against the carriage shaft. Then, under all eyes, I slowly bent down. I removed the exquisitely embroidered phoenix-toed shoes from my feet, followed by the silk stockings. A pair of feet, never soiled by dust or mud, were exposed to the icy air. Their delicate skin stood starkly out of place against the coarse snow-covered ground. A wave of unrestrained laughter, shrieks, and whistles erupted from the crowd. At the edge of the throng, a tall black horse emerged slowly. Seated atop it was a man clad in the bright red attire of a groom. Unlike the uncouth bandits around him, his posture was straight and tall, his bearing noble and dignified. That festive red, worn by him, inexplicably radiated a chilling aura. Seeing me remove my shoes and socks, he did not dismount. He simply looked down on me from his lofty perch. A faint, mocking smile played on his lips, a cold curve. So he too wished to see me humiliated. Very well. I'd grant his wish. The instant my bare feet touched the snow-covered ground, a bone-chilling cold shot straight up from my soles to the crown of my head, sending a shiver through my entire body. My toes instinctively curled inward. Qingyu beside me nearly cried out in sympathy. I patted her shoulder to calm her. The snow wasn't deep, but it was icy and hard, stinging the tender soles of my feet. Each step felt like treading on countless sharp needles. Ha ha ha, look at her feet. This princess's feet are truly delicate and tender. Wonder how many steps she can manage? The voices mingled, dripping with scorn, trying to crush my dignity. But I paid them no mind. I was calculating distance. Calculating where I needed to be for Lu Xuancheng to clearly see my face. The bone-chilling cold spread from my soles throughout my body. Each step felt like dancing on the edge of a blade. Yet I forced myself to keep going, even as my feet were already soaked in blood. Just as I judged I'd entered the range where Lu Xuancheng could clearly see my face, my ankle just happened to give way. I let out a startled cry. Then I fell heavily to the side and forward. "Princess!" Qingyu's shriek pierced the chaos. In that split second of imbalance, my arm unintentionally shot upward. It hooked precisely onto the edge of that large crimson veil. I yanked hard. The veil fluttered free, drifting lightly through the icy air. In that instant, my unmasked face was exposed to all. Snow-laden wind swept stray strands of my dark hair, clinging to my pale yet undeniably exquisite cheeks. I lifted my eyes, tears pooling and trembling at the rims. The most fragile, most vulnerable form I could muster. As I gently raised my head, my gaze met Lu Xuancheng's, who sat high atop his horse. Our eyes locked. I saw the mocking expression on his face freeze, then crack. Replaced by shock, his pupils suddenly contracting. And panic. He had clearly recognized me. This face he had once hidden in a dark room, painting countless portraits of. Lu Xuancheng sprang from his saddle as if electrocuted. The bandit leader who remained unflinching before 1,000 troops. Now, his movement was so abrupt his boot caught on the stirrup. His body staggered, nearly tumbling from the horse in a clumsy fall. But he cared not for appearances. He practically scrambled off his horse. Panicked, he raced toward me. "Get out of the way! All of you, get the hell out of my way!" I lowered my head, a faint smile curling my lips. It worked. Dog training routine officially commenced. Lu Xuancheng charged to my front, his towering figure instantly blocking the wind and snow. He crouched down, his hand reaching out to touch me before snapping back. Finally, his voice raspy, he asked, Are you okay?" The blizzard raged on, yet the entire entrance to the mountain stronghold fell into a deathly silence. Everyone stared in stunned silence at their fearsome stronghold leader. Before the woman he should have humiliated, he displayed an unprecedented loss of composure and humility. My eyes reddened as I looked up at him. My feet hurt. Lu Xuancheng stripped off his own clothes almost without hesitation. With gentle yet swift motions, he wrapped them around me. Then he bent down, one arm slipping under my knees, the other encircling my back. Carefully, he lifted me horizontally into his arms. My body suddenly left the ground, and I instinctively wrapped my arms around his neck. Through the fabric, I could feel the taut tension in his arm muscles. "Are you all fucking blind? Get the doctor here. Bring me every last bit of the best wound medicine and frostbite ointment in the whole village." Lu Xuancheng whipped his head around, roaring at the group of subordinates frozen stiff behind him. The panic and fury in his voice made several timid henchmen's knees buckle. The man who had earlier clamored to take the path of purity plucked up the courage to ask. "But chieftain, this rule." "Rule? What rule?" Lu Xuancheng's gaze was like a knife. "From now on, the princess's word is the rule. Anyone who dares mention the path of purity again, I'll chop off their feet and pave the road with them." The man stared in disbelief, muttering under his breath. "But this rule, isn't it one you just made?" Lu Xuanzheng nearly stumbled and fell. Inside the main hall, the charcoal fire burned fiercely, radiating warmth. It felt like two different worlds compared to the frozen wasteland outside. Lu Xuancheng gently laid me on the bed covered in thick animal hides, his movements unnaturally tender. Let me see." He knelt on one knee beside the bed, wanting to examine the injury on my foot. Yet he seemed somewhat flustered. I lifted my foot slightly and extended it toward him. Only then did Lu Xuancheng seem to receive permission, carefully cradling my ankle. My once fair feet were now frozen crimson. The soles bore several gashes from ice, snow, and sharp stones. Blood seeped through the cuts, and the swelling made them look pitifully wretched. Lu Xuancheng's breath caught abruptly, his eyes stinging red. He lifted his head, his eyes brimming with regret and self-reproach. "Princess, I'm sorry. I bit my lip. It's fine. It's all part of the rules. I understand. Also, don't call me princess. Call me Qingci, or Yao." At that moment, I finally realized Lu Xuancheng had just recognized me. The year I saved Lu Xuancheng, I had just turned 12. Late spring, early summer, I was restless with play. After much pleading with my mother, the Empress Dowager, I was finally allowed to disguise myself as an ordinary noble lady and visit the Hugu temple outside the capital to burn incense and pray for blessings. It was in that secluded peach grove behind the temple that I encountered him. Back then, Lu Xuancheng was not the formidable bandit leader he is today, commanding vast armies and striking fear into all who hear his name. He lay beneath a peach tree strewn with fallen blossoms, his coarse, faded cotton tunic stained with blood, barely clinging to life. Several well-dressed men, their faces twisted with vicious intent, surrounded him, punching and kicking. Their curses were foul and unrelenting. "Beat this little bastard to death. How dare he bully our young master? Look at his pitiful, penniless state, he deserves to die." He curled into a ball, his hands clutching his head tightly, not uttering a sound. Only his eyes, peering through the gap in his arms, fixed on them like a wolf's, filled with defiance and ferocity. My footsteps halted. I stepped forward with my escorting guards. This is a sacred place of Buddhism. Why stir up bloodshed? Seeing my distinguished attire and imposing bearing, along with my capable-looking guards, the servant's arrogance instantly diminished. The leader muttered resentfully, "He struck our young master." The youth lifted his chin stubbornly. "Then your young master deserved it." The servants tried to retort, but I silenced them with a single glance. They glanced at the guards behind me. Seeing no advantage to be gained, they shot the youth on the ground a vicious glare and stormed off, cursing under their breath. I walked over to the youth and crouched down beside him. He watched me warily, his body tense like a wounded little beast. "Are you all right?" I asked softly. He didn't speak, only stared at me. I pulled a plain white silk handkerchief from my sleeve. Then I produced the superior wound medicine I always carried, along with several silver ingots. I placed them gently on the handkerchief and offered it to him. "Your wounds need tending. This medicine works well." He still didn't move, his eyes brimming with suspicion and wariness. I sighed, placing the handkerchief and medicine within his reach before standing up. The world is harsh. Survival is no easy feat. Find a place that can protect you and live well. With that, I led my men away. After walking a considerable distance, I looked back. Beneath the swirling peach blossoms, the battered youth had struggled to sit up. His hand clutched the plain white silk handkerchief tightly. He stared in the direction I had departed, his gaze heavy, motionless for a long time. Later, back in the palace, I dismissed this incident as a minor interlude, quickly pushing it from my mind. Little did I know that handkerchief, scented with medicine and adorned with a subtle jasmine pattern, would become the sole light in a certain youth's darkest days. "Does it hurt?" Lu Xuanzheng's deep, husky voice pulled me from my memories. He was carefully applying cool ointment to my wounds, his movements as gentle as a feather's touch. I shook my head, my gaze settling on his face, etched with worry. It was hard to reconcile the composed man before me with the boy I'd seen 6 years ago in the bamboo grove, covered in wounds, his eyes fierce and filled with despair. I knew nothing of what he'd endured after leaving. How he had survived this cruel world, step by step, to become the Black Wind chieftain commanding 200,000 bandits, a figure even the imperial court feared. I only knew this. In my past life, when he found me, tortured to the brink of death by the Marquis of Dingbei, his eyes reddened as he said, "For 6 years, I fought my way up with everything I had, just to find you one day and stand before you in glory. But I came back too late. Princess, I'm sorry." Only then did I realize this youth had always held me in his heart. Yet this sliver of kindness cost him his life. "It doesn't hurt anymore," I replied softly, withdrawing my foot and curling into the warm animal skin. Lu Xuancheng's hand froze midair, a hint of disappointment visible. He rose to his feet, his tall silhouette casting a shadow beneath the lamplight. "Rest well. I'll handle things outside. No one will disturb you again." With that, he turned to leave. "Lu Xuancheng." I called him back. "Can we still get married?" Lu Xuancheng's footsteps halted abruptly, his back stiffening instantly. He whirled around, his deep eyes suddenly bursting with fireworks, blindingly bright. "Yes. Of course we can." He practically snatched the answer. His voice trembled slightly with excitement. An unnatural flush spread across his cheeks. "Wait here. I'll go make arrangements right now." As if overwhelmed by immense joy, he turned to rush out. But just as he reached the doorway, he abruptly halted. Then, somewhat reluctantly, he turned back slowly. He raised his hand, scratching the back of his head uncomfortably. "How about waiting until your foot injury heals?" I'm short on supplies, but I've sent someone to rush order everything. In a few days, we'll have a grand celebration. How does that sound?" I couldn't help but chuckle inwardly. When he carried me inside earlier, I'd already noticed. This main hall was spacious and sturdy, yet beyond the 2 half-hearted red lanterns hanging by the doorway, there wasn't even a proper double happiness character inside. The table was utterly bare, no trace of the festive atmosphere a wedding should have. Perhaps he'd originally received an imperial decree forcing him to marry a princess he'd never met. Holding a grudge, he'd never intended to organize a proper ceremony. He likely just wanted to go through the motions, giving me a taste of his authority. Now that he recognized me, panic set in, and he regretted his lack of preparation. Seeing him so flustered now, I wanted to chuckle. But I forced myself to hide the amusement in my eyes. I nodded gently, my voice soft and compliant. "All right, I'll do as you say." Lu Xuancheng practically crashed into the door on his way out. After Qingyu entered, she muttered, "Princess, this Chief Lu seems rather dim-witted. How could he walk into a door? He doesn't seem anything like the notorious bandit leader he's rumored to be." I took the warm, wrung-out cloth from her and applied it to my still stinging ankle, a faint smile touching my lips at her words. You can't judge a book by its cover. If he were truly just a brute who only knew how to bully and fight, he wouldn't have gathered this army of 20,000. Qingyu nodded, seeming to understand yet not quite grasping it. My foot injury healed significantly after 3 or 4 days. Lu Xuancheng practically treated me like a delicate porcelain doll, reluctant to let me even step off the bed. All manner of tonics, healing ointments, and odd trinkets were constantly delivered to my room. He himself, however, was perpetually busy and rarely seen. He only appeared occasionally during supper. He would sit quietly with me during meals, yet his gaze would always drift toward me unconsciously. When caught, he'd immediately sit up straight, his ears flushing crimson. One afternoon, the sunlight was perfect. With Qingyu's support, I slowly walked around the courtyard. The courtyard surrounding the main house was quite spacious, backed by a mountain wall, offering an expansive view. One could see the distant, rolling mountain ranges and the scattered rooftops of the village. Just as I began to move freely, a commotion erupted outside the courtyard gate. A woman dressed in a peach-colored gown, adorned with rather flamboyant makeup, pushed past the guards and barged straight in. Upon seeing me, her eyes held an unmasked scrutiny and a hint of hostility. "Oh my, is this the princess of our great Shin kingdom, the one destined to marry Brother Zheng?" Her voice was sweet and coquettish, yet her gaze sliced through me like knives. Her eyes darkened noticeably when she spotted the dark cloak of Lu Xuanzheng draped over my shoulders. Qingyu immediately stepped forward, shielding me. "Young lady, what gives you the right to barge into the princess's quarters without permission?" The girl before us snorted derisively. "Princess?" She raised an eyebrow, her tone dripping with scorn. "In Blackwind Fort, we follow our own rules, not your palace nonsense." She scrutinized me from head to toe, her gaze finally settling on my ankle, still swollen from injury. A cryptic smile played at the corners of her mouth. "I hear the princess stepped in snow a few days ago and hurt her foot. Our paths are rough here, nothing like the palace's precious floors. You'll need to adjust slowly." Qingyu's face drained white with fury. Just as she opened her mouth, I gently pressed her hand down. "May I ask who this young lady is?" My father was the former chief of Blackwind Fortress, Master Zheng's mentor. Her tone carried unmasked pride and provocation. "I am his junior sister, Lu Yi." "I see." I gave a slight nod. "As the beloved daughter of the late Chief Lu and Xuanzheng's junior sister, you are no stranger here. However," I shifted my tone gently, "however, as the leader of this stronghold, Xuanzheng's quarters are a restricted area. No one may enter without prior permission. Today I am here, but if Xuanzheng were handling urgent matters, Miss Lu barging in like this might not be appropriate, would it?" The smugness on Lu Yi's face froze instantly, replaced by intense fury. Her eyebrows shot up, her voice sharpening. "Stop trying to intimidate me with your fort rules. I come to see Brother Zheng, I've never needed permission. This courtyard is mine to enter as I please, who are you to dictate my movements?" She took a step forward, nearly closing in on me, only to be firmly blocked by Qingyu. "Brother Zheng hasn't formally wed you yet. Don't go thinking you're the mistress of this place. Trying to flex your authority in front of me? You're not qualified." The moment Lu Yi finished speaking, steady footsteps echoed outside the courtyard gate. Lu Xuanzheng's tall figure appeared at the entrance. He seemed to have just concluded business affairs, a lingering aura of sternness still visible between his brows. Lu Yi's eyes lit up instantly, her face shifting to a look of hurt innocence. Like a fluttering butterfly, she fluttered toward him. She wrapped her arms around Lu Xuancheng's arm, her voice dripping with sweetness. "Brother Zheng, you're finally here. This princess you brought is quite the bossy one. I only came to check on her out of kindness, but she went and pulled out some village rules to intimidate me, saying I was rude and trespassing in restricted areas. She even demanded I announce my arrival next time I enter. But when did our relationship ever require such formalities?" She leaned half her body against Lu Xuanzheng. Holding onto his arm, she swayed back and forth as she protested. "Brother Zheng, you must stand up for me." Qing Yu rolled her eyes watching from the side. I stood rooted to the spot, silently observing Lu Xuancheng. I hadn't missed the moment he entered, his gaze first landed on me. Only after confirming I was unharmed did he turn toward Lu Yi. Seeing my frown, his body instantly stiffened. He immediately shoved Lu Yi aside. "Lu Yi!" His voice was low, carrying an unquestionable rebuke. "Stand up straight when you speak." Even as he spoke, he couldn't help stealing glances at my expression. Lu Yi stumbled from his sudden push. Her eyes widened in disbelief, her eyelids instantly reddening. "Brother Zheng, you pushed me?" Lu Xuanzheng didn't look at her again. His gaze was fixed firmly on me. His brows furrowed as he strode quickly to my side. "Yao." His voice softened slightly, tinged with obvious tension. "Did she bump into you? How's your ankle? Does it hurt if you stand too long?" As he asked, he instinctively reached out to support me. Yet, as if sensing it was inappropriate, his hand paused midair. In the end, he only watched my expression anxiously. At that moment, I genuinely felt a dull ache in my ankle. Probably from standing too long earlier. I let out a soft hiss, my brow furrowing even deeper. Lu Xuanzheng's expression changed instantly. "Qing Yu, escort the princess inside to rest." He turned sharply to Lu Yi and barked, "From this day forward, no one, including you, is to set foot in this courtyard without permission. Dare disturb the princess again, and you'll face the full force of the garrison's rules." Lu Yi was stunned by his barrage of words. Her lips trembled, and suddenly, she burst into tears. "Lu Xuancheng, you're actually being so harsh with me for her sake? I'll never speak to you again." She pointed at Lu Xuancheng, hurled a few curses, then turned and ran out, sobbing. Lu Xuancheng didn't even glance at her, rushing instead to explain to me. "Io, don't be angry. Yi's just been spoiled rotten. I'll discipline her strictly later." I nodded. "It's fine." Lu Yi's thunderous threats were all bark and no bite, utterly harmless. Before we could even settle in the mountain stronghold, His Imperial Majesty sent envoys to seek me and Lu Xuancheng. By the third evening, several palace eunuchs, escorted by a squadron of elite cavalry, arrived bearing imperial credentials at the Black Wind Stronghold's Hall of Brotherhood. Lu Xuancheng received the notice and furrowed his brow slightly. Nevertheless, he led me and several other chieftains to receive the imperial decree. The eunuch unrolled the bright yellow scroll, his gaze first settling on Lu Xuancheng with a scrutinizing look. Then it swept over me, and he gave a slight nod of acknowledgement. "By the mandate of heaven, the Emperor decrees, Lu Xuancheng, chief of Blackwind Fortress, renowned for valor and loyalty throughout the frontier, is hereby conferred the title of General of Peace and Security. He shall hold the rank of third-grade military officer and be granted a residence in the capital. He is expected to fulfill his duties diligently and serve the nation faithfully. So decreed." After reading the edict, the attendant closed the scroll, his face breaking into a smile. "General Lu, receive the edict. His Royal Highness the Second Prince vouched for you most earnestly before His Majesty, hence this exceptional promotion. The Prince also specifically instructed me to ensure the General and the Princess depart for the capital without delay. The Imperial Consort yearns deeply for the Princess. The General may also enter the capital sooner to share the nation's burdens." The words were polished, yet their meaning was unmistakable. My brother, Yu, was itching to seize control of Lu Xuancheng's 20,000 troops. Bringing him to the capital with his military power would make him a formidable ally in Qinchengyu's bid for the throne. Lu Xuancheng knelt on one knee, his voice solemn. This servant, Lu Xuancheng, receives the edict. The eunuch leaned closer, his voice hushed. With a touch of flattery, he addressed Lu Xuancheng, General, His Royal Highness the Second Prince has a few private words for you through me. The prince says we are all family now. Your troops are his reliance. Upon your return to the capital, if you could bring along some of your elite forces to bolster his presence, it would be most welcome. Should His Highness achieve his aspirations, he will never forget the general's service today. This was practically a blatant demand for military authority. Standing beside Lu Xuancheng, I could sense the slight tension in his aura. His gaze grew deep, and he did not respond immediately. He merely said calmly, "Thank you for conveying the message, eunuch. But this matter is of great importance. Allow me to consult with my brothers before finalizing our plans." The eunuch glanced at me again, hoping I might intercede. But I remained silent. The eunuch could only chuckle awkwardly. Of course. I shall await the general's favorable response at the stronghold." After the eunuch was escorted away to rest, several trusted leaders headed straight for the assembly hall, clearly to discuss the matter. Lu Xuancheng looked at me, as if he wanted to say something but held back. I stepped back at the right moment. Since the general must attend to official business, I shall retire for the night. As I turned, I heard someone shout, "What does the court think it's doing? Offering a title to co-opt all 20,000 of our brothers? Demanding we go to the capital? That's like offering our necks to be cut. I told you so. We never should have agreed to the chieftain marrying that damn princess." Back in the courtyard, Qingyu helped me remove my hairpins, her face heavy with worry. "Princess, don't take their words to heart. Chief Lu. He treats you differently." I gazed at my calm reflection in the bronze mirror and murmured a soft "hm." Of course I knew Lu Xuancheng treated me differently. Otherwise, he wouldn't have died for me in my past life. But I couldn't let this specialness cost him the lives of 20,000 brothers. I had to speed up my plans. Deep into the night, the mountain stronghold gradually fell silent. Seated by the window, I embroidered a handkerchief by the light of a solitary lamp. On it, several orchids swayed in the breeze. Footsteps halted outside the courtyard gate. A familiar presence drew near. Lu Xuancheng had arrived. He hesitated outside the door for a moment before knocking softly. Qingyu opened the door and then stepped back out. He entered, carrying the faint chill of night dew and a trace of weariness. "Still awake?" His voice was slightly hoarse. I set down my needlework and looked up at him. In the candlelight, the weight between his brows hadn't fully lifted. He didn't mention the council at the Brotherhood Hall, nor did he speak of the imperial edict. He simply sat across from me and asked, "Yao, if I decide not to return to the capital for now, would you blame me?" I didn't answer. Instead, I rose and walked toward him. Then, under his slightly startled gaze, I sat down on his firm thigh. The man beneath me froze instantly, his breath catching for a moment. My arms naturally wrapped around his neck. I could feel every muscle in his body tense. He reached out as if to steady me, yet hesitated, afraid to touch me. His ears flushed bright red. His words came out stammering. "Yao. You. I leaned closer, gazing intently into his eyes. "Lu Xuancheng, we won't discuss the capital or the imperial decree now." I lifted his chin, my fingertips lightly tracing his taut jawline. "I only ask you this, are we still getting married? If you don't want to marry me, then I'll marry? I'm willing to marry you." Lu Xuancheng nearly growled the words. I've dreamed of marrying you." As he spoke, he suddenly lowered his head and captured my lips. Even through layers of fabric, I could feel that hard, burning sensation pressed tightly against me. It was filled with dangerous aggression and surging desire. Darkness breeds the most ambiguous desires. Yet Lu Xuancheng had held back all night. This forced me to see him in a new light. Gazing at my lips, ravaged repeatedly, and my clothes nearly torn to shreds, Lu Xuancheng flushed crimson, his eyes darting away. You can't tempt me like this anymore. We We'll do it after we're married. This big oaf, I'm impressed. After speaking, Lu Xuancheng practically bolted from my room. Leaving me alone with the disheveled bed and the lingering, suggestive air, I found myself both amused and exasperated. In the days that followed, the entire Black Wind Fortress suddenly came alive. Lu Xuancheng was clearly determined to make the wedding the grandest celebration ever. Red silk ribbons stretched from the camp's entrance all the way to the assembly hall, unbroken and continuous, like a fiery dragon. The training grounds, normally used for drills, were cleared and transformed into a wedding pavilion large enough to hold over 1,000 people. Delicacies from the mountains and wild game, fine wines and exquisite brews, were continuously transported in from all directions, piled up like mountains. Every member of the bandit stronghold, regardless of age or gender, wore a joyful expression as they bustled about with nimble hands and feet. Even those leaders who had initially voiced reservations about me. Seeing Lu Xuancheng take such solemn measures, they set aside their discontent and began to diligently help with the preparations. Lu Yi, seemingly admonished by Lu Xuancheng's stern warning, never appeared before me again. Only occasionally did I catch a distant glimpse of her, glaring at me indignantly. Lu Xuancheng was busy beyond measure, yet insisted on personally overseeing every detail. He even scrutinized the design of the wedding robes and the patterns of the jewelry. The phoenix crown and ceremonial robe he sent were extraordinarily magnificent, adorned with gold thread, silver embroidery, and dazzling pearls and jade. They surpassed the imperial court's standard designs in grandeur and splendor. On the wedding day, the heavens smiled upon us with a clear, cloudless sky. Dressed in elaborate and solemn bridal attire, I was meticulously groomed by Qingyu and several fortunate women from the village. Gazing at my own reflection, my cloud-like hair, flower-like face, and jeweled adornments, I felt a moment of disorientation. I had survived. In this life, I had truly escaped the sea of suffering. The auspicious hour arrived. Firecrackers crackled, gongs and drums resounded. A crimson veil was placed over my head. Supported by attendants, I stepped slowly toward the Hall of Brotherhood. Beneath my feet lay a soft crimson carpet, around me, deafening cheers and blessings filled the air. Through the slit beneath the veil, I saw a large hand with prominent knuckles and thin calluses reach out. With a barely perceptible tremor, it clasped mine tightly. "Io." He called my name softly, his voice taut. "Mm." I squeezed his hand gently in return. The ritual of bowing to heaven and earth unfolded solemnly and smoothly. Until the final command, "Escort them to the bridal chamber," echoed through the hall. Beside me, the man exhaled a long, almost inaudible sigh of relief. His grip on my hand instantly tightened, our fingers interlocking tightly. Inside the bridal chamber, crimson candles burned brightly, filling the room with warm glow. The wedding wine slid down my throat, its sharpness pale compared to the heat in the man beside me. The matchmaker in attendance smiled, lips pressed together, as they withdrew, closing the door softly. In the vast room, only the two of us remained. I sat upright on the edge of the bed, covered in a large red mandarin duck brocade quilt. My veil had been lifted, revealing a sea of festive crimson. Lu Xuancheng stood in his bright red ceremonial robes, his posture erect. His usually stern features softened in the candlelight, his eyes brimming with longing and nervousness. "Yao." His Adam's apple bobbed. "I've finally married you." Warm and slightly intoxicated, he slowly lowered his head, tentatively, gently capturing my lips. At first, the kiss was an exquisitely tender caress, almost reverent in its carefulness. But soon, emotions held back for far too long burst forth like a dam breaking. It grew urgent, possessive. The crimson wedding robes were shed piece by piece, scattering across the floor. Candlelight flickered, casting intertwined shadows upon the walls. Lost in passion, I flipped over and straddled his waist. His breath caught, his voice hoarse and broken. "Yao. Don't move." I commanded. My fingertips slowly traced the defined contours of his chest. I felt the sharply defined muscles tense instantly. Then, I settled in. Lu Xuancheng grunted, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. His eyes were filled with struggle and a desire bordering on pleading. "Yao. Stop playing." "Playing?" I raised an eyebrow, pressing my fingertip firmly yet not too hard against his pulse point. Watching his cheeks flush instantly and his breath catch sharply. I drawled, "Husband, I've never been one for passivity." He gritted his teeth. You want me to die beneath you, don't you? After a night of passion. Leaning against Lu Xuancheng, I asked him, "Lu Xuancheng, that imperial throne, my brother sits upon it. Might I also sit upon it?" The air seemed to freeze in that instant. The man beneath me stiffened abruptly, turning his head to look at me. Do you know what you're saying?" "Of course I do." I met his scrutinizing gaze. "What my imperial brother can give you, I can give you tenfold in the future. What he cannot give you, like ruling the world side by side, I can give you that too." I sat up slightly, candlelight tracing the curves of my form clad only in undergarments. Yet my gaze remained sharp, fixed outside the window. Why should this world be ruled only by men? Lu Xuancheng sucked in a sharp breath. His gaze upon me grew intensely complex. Shock, scrutiny, and inner turmoil swirled within it. Finally, he let out a low, sudden laugh, tinged with reckless abandon and release. "Very well." He flipped over abruptly, pinning me beneath him once more. "If my lady desires the throne, I shall seize it for you." The currents beneath the surface in the capital were far more turbulent than I had imagined. After witnessing my consummation with Lu Xuancheng that day, the eunuch attendant returned the next morning, his face beaming with glee as he pressed me urgently. "Since your highness has consummated the union with General Lu, I implore you to persuade him to set out without delay." The second prince is pacing the capital, his eyes burning with longing. Seated before my dressing table, I let Qingyu arrange my hair. "What's the rush? General Lu has received the imperial decree, he will naturally comply. But mobilizing 20,000 troops is no trivial matter. He must be given time to make proper arrangements." The eunuch withdrew, looking sheepish. 10 days later, Lu Xuancheng and I set out for the capital with 5,000 elite soldiers. These 5,000 were the Black Wind Fortress's most elite troops, disguised as merchant convoy guards, infiltrating the capital in waves. On the day we arrived, my imperial brother personally greeted us outside the city gates. He wore the casual attire of a prince, his smile gentle and warm. Yet his gaze lingered for a moment on the hands of Lu Xuancheng and mine, clasped together. "My sister, you must be exhausted from the journey." He stepped forward to support me, lowering his voice. "How did things go?" I lowered my gaze and smiled faintly. "Rest assured, Your Highness. General Lu is now one of us." A flicker of satisfaction passed through my brother's eyes before he turned to Lu Xuancheng. "My dear brother-in-law, urgent reports from the frontier, the barbarian tribes have invaded our borders once more. I have recommended you to father as commander-in-chief. You shall lead the troops out immediately." Lu Xuancheng clasped his fists. "Your servant shall do his utmost." The night before departure, Lu Xuancheng held me tightly in his arms. The capital is treacherous. Be cautious while I am away." I retrieved a letter from beneath the pillow. It details the barbarians' invasion route, troop deployments, and conflicts among key tribes. Follow the strategies outlined, and you'll pacify the frontier within a year. Lu Xuancheng stared at me in shock. "Where did you get this intelligence?" My fingertip lightly touched his lips. "Don't ask. Just trust me. If any adjustments are needed, write to me." He nodded firmly. After scrutinizing the letter repeatedly, he burned it clean. The next day, the army set out. Standing atop the city wall, I watched his receding figure and gently placed my hand on my abdomen. Here, our child was already growing. But now was not the time to tell him. After Lu Xuancheng left the capital, I moved into the princess's residence arranged by my imperial brother. On the surface, it was an honor, in reality, it was surveillance. But I didn't mind. Each day, I admired flowers and sipped tea, occasionally visiting the palace to converse with my mother, the Empress Dowager. I appeared to be a carefree princess untouched by worldly affairs. Only Qingyu knew that in the dead of night, by candlelight, I wrote down every name and drew every relationship diagram. "Princess, the third prince visited the Duke of the Nation's residence again today." Qingyu whispered the report while grinding ink for me. My brush paused, circling the words Duke of the Nation. "It seems they can't wait any longer." In my previous life, by this time, the third prince would have already obtained evidence of my brother's factionalism and corruption. But in this life, how could I let him succeed? Soon after, my brother paid a late-night visit. He dismissed all attendants, fixing his gaze directly on me. "Yao, do you know what third brother has been investigating lately?" I feigned ignorance. "Why do you ask, Your Highness?" "He's looking into last year's Jiangnan grain transport case." His face darkened. "That case was handled by my people." A cold laugh echoed in my heart. Just as it was in my previous life. But this time, I'd handed him the blade ahead of time. "Why worry, Your Majesty?" I poured him a cup of tea, my voice soft. "While third brother investigates the grain transport, why not look into military supplies?" His pupils contracted sharply. Last year during the border garrison rotation, Third Prince's faction had substituted inferior goods for military equipment, lining their own pockets. This was the secret uncovered in my previous life, just before my brother nearly fell to the Third Prince's schemes. Now, it was time to put it to use. Months later, my brother publicly confronted the Third Prince in the imperial court. The evidence was irrefutable. The Third Prince had no defense. The emperor was furious, immediately stripping him of his regency powers and confining him to his residence. When the news arrived, I was pruning a pot of orchids. "Princess, it's done." Qingyu's voice carried suppressed excitement. I snipped the last withered branch, gazed at the gracefully upright orchid, and smiled faintly. Not enough. To uproot a great tree, one must dig out its roots entirely. The Duke of Xingguo's estate must also fall. But beyond that, I must kill one more person. That person is the Marquis of Dingbei, who tortured me to death in my previous life. The Duke of the State had cultivated influence in the court for decades, his disciples and allies permeating all 6 ministries. He was certainly not easily shaken. After the Third Prince was confined, the Duke of the State's residence appeared quiet, yet turbulent currents swirled beneath the surface. Sure enough, within half a month, the political winds shifted once more. Officials aligned with the Duke of the State began submitting joint petitions, claiming hidden truths behind the military arms case and demanding a retrial. Others secretly spread rumors that the entire affair was a scheme orchestrated by the second prince to eliminate rivals. My brother was so enraged he smashed a teacup in the mansion. "That old bastard! Even at death's door, he dares to fight back." I sat quietly nearby, embroidering. Only after he had vented his fury did I speak softly. "Why let it anger you, Your Highness? The Duke of Xingguo is merely a cornered dog lashing out. And we are to let him slander me? Certainly not." I set down my embroidery frame. But rather than engage in a protracted battle with him, we should seek a quicker, more decisive solution. My brother frowned. "What solution?" "The Marquis of Dingbei." I uttered the 3 words slowly. "He commands the capital's military forces. If he were willing to assist." My brother's eyes lit up, then hesitated. "But the Marquis of Dingbei has always remained neutral." "That's because the stakes weren't high enough." My brother pondered for a moment, then realized with a flash of understanding. "He covets the military authority in the northern border regions that will be vacated after the Duke of Zhongguo's downfall." "Not only that." I cut him off. "We must also make him believe this was all his own idea." After guiding my brother, he acted with decisive speed. Within half a month, the court's dynamics had quietly shifted. The Marquis of Dingbei began frequently targeting the Duke of Zhen's faction in court. The Duke of Zhen, unwilling to be outdone, instructed his disciples to impeach the Marquis of Dingbei for allowing his subordinates to oppress the people. The 2 factions clashed fiercely. I watched coldly, adding fuel to the fire at opportune moments. "Qingyu, deliver evidence of the Marquis of Dingbei's abduction of a commoner's daughter and reckless horseback riding causing injuries to the censorate. Also, copy the ledgers documenting the Prince of Zhen's disciples embezzling Riverworks funds and send them to the 3 judicial departments. While the mantis stalks the cicada, the oriole waits behind." I intended to make them both suffer defeat. One day while strolling in the courtyard, Qingyu rushed in with news. "Princess! Victory at the frontier! The prince consort has routed the enemy forces and will return triumphant shortly." I placed my hand on my swollen belly, a genuine smile curving my lips. He was finally coming home. Yet my joy was short-lived as the capital's situation took a sudden turn for the worse. Father's illness grew worse by the day, the imperial physicians utterly helpless. Mother kept vigil by the imperial bedside night and day, locked and open in covert struggles with consort Shu. Meanwhile, upon hearing news of Lu Xuancheng's great victory, the Duke of Zhen's faction could no longer sit idly by. They could not stand by and watch Lu Xuancheng return triumphant, bolstering my brother's power like adding wings to a tiger. With only days left before my due date, Qing Yu rushed in, her face ashen. "Princess, it's terrible. The Duke of the State has rallied behind the third prince in rebellion. The Marquis of Dingbei is leading troops to suppress it. The capital is under martial law." I rose, my heavy belly weighing me down, and walked to the window. Distant cries of battle echoed faintly, flames blazing skyward beneath the night sky. "Princess, what shall we do? The princess's residence is no longer safe." Qing Yu paced frantically, her voice trembling with tears. Just as I was about to speak, hurried footsteps echoed outside the courtyard. "Protect the chieftain's wife." It was Lu Yi's voice. She burst in, leading a squad of Black Wind Bandit's elite fighters. Her expression remained cold upon seeing me. But upon catching sight of my pregnant belly, she gave a cold snort. "Though I dislike you, you are Brother Zheng's wife, the mistress of Black Wind Fort. Until Brother Zheng returns, I will protect you." True to their nature, martial artists value loyalty and righteousness, their love and hatred clear-cut. Lu Yi brought only Lu Xuanzheng's trusted confidants, each a formidable fighter. She commanded with calm authority, swiftly fortifying the princess's residence like a fortress. "Rest assured." She glanced at me. "With me here, no one can touch you." Watching her stubborn profile, a faint warmth touched my heart. After I give birth, I'll find you a marriage partner, okay?" She froze, then curled her lip. "Who asked you to meddle? This year, there's a new top scholar named Zhou Yunwen." I continued, "He's just 20 and unmarried. They say he's exceptionally handsome and highly talented." Lu Yi remained unmoved. "What's even rarer is that he excels in both literary and martial arts. He trained in martial arts since childhood under a master from a May mountain, and his sword skills are divine. They say during a recent sparring match at the training grounds, he disarmed the Imperial Guard instructor's spear in just 3 moves. Lu Yi's eyes lit up. "Really? Of course it's true." I smiled faintly, lips pressed together. "Most importantly, he once declared openly that he most admires chivalrous women of the martial world. And he detests affected, prim young ladies of noble birth." "He actually said that?" A blush spread across Lu Yi's cheeks, though she forced herself to remain composed. "No, who? Who would be asking about such things?" It was at that moment the labor pains struck suddenly. I gripped the edge of the table, the agony bending me double. "Princess!" Qing Yu cried out. Lu Yi's expression changed instantly as she rushed forward to support me. "You're giving birth?" She acted decisively. "Qing Yu, fetch the midwife. Everyone else, guard every entrance and exit. Not a single soul is to enter." I struggled on the birthing bed all night long. Outside, the clamor of battle shook the heavens. Inside and outside the palace, chaos reigned. Lu Yi remained by my side the entire time. "You must hold on. I'm still waiting for you to bring that top scholar back for me." I couldn't tell whether to laugh or cry. At dawn, a loud cry pierced the sky. "It's a little princess," the midwife announced joyfully. Weakly, I took the child. Tears blurred my vision as I gazed at her wrinkled little face. Just then, thunderous cheers erupted outside. "General Lu has returned. The rebels have surrendered." Lu Yi sprang to her feet, tears glistening in her eyes. I knew it. I knew Brother Zheng would make it back in time. Before she could finish, the door burst open. Lu Xuanzheng stood in the doorway, clad in full military gear, his armor still stained with blood. His gaze swept past Lu Yi, landing directly on me and the infant. "Yao." Lu Xuanzheng strode to the bedside and dropped to one knee. His trembling hand gently touched the infant's cheek before turning to my pale, sweat-drenched face. "Yao, you've endured so much. I came back too late. I shook my head and pushed the child closer to him. Look at your daughter. He took her with utmost care. That ruthless, decisive warrior's demeanor dissolved into clumsy awkwardness the moment he touched the soft infant. Lu Yi clicked her tongue twice and left the room awkwardly. What's the situation outside? Lu Xuancheng's expression hardened. Most of the Duke of Zhen's private troops have been wiped out. The third prince was captured alive. The Duke of Zhen was personally executed by the second prince before the Tai Hall. He paused, turning to look at me. He whispered, as per your instructions, the Marquis of Dingbei vanished in the chaos. But in truth, my men captured him, broke his limbs, and threw him into a water dungeon. A heavy weight lifted from my heart. Excellent. Everything is proceeding according to plan. What of His Imperial Majesty? The second prince is currently cleaning up the mess within the palace and comforting the emperor. I hummed in acknowledgement. Have someone keep a close watch on him. Exhausted from the ordeal, I fell into a deep sleep. When I awoke, it was already the afternoon of the following day. News arrived from the palace. Upon hearing of the palace coup, Father Emperor was overcome with shock and rage. His condition deteriorated rapidly, and he now lay on his deathbed. Shen Qingyu, acting as regent prince, assumed control of all state affairs. He ordered the third prince and his followers imprisoned in the heavenly dungeon, awaiting judgment. At this moment, Shen Qingyu was likely impatiently reaping the fruits of his victory. Savoring what he believed to be the easily attained imperial throne. He forgot me, and he underestimated Lu Xuancheng. 3 days later, I went to see him. The imperial bedchamber was thick with the pungent scent of medicine and the decaying stench of impending death. Shen Qingyu stood before the dragon bed, feigning devotion to his father's care, yet his eyes betrayed an excitement he could barely contain. Seeing me enter, he looked slightly surprised. Your Imperial Highness, you are still weak after childbirth. Why not rest properly? Your presence here suffices. I did not look at him, walking straight to the imperial bed. Gazing at the once majestic, now withered emperor, I whispered softly, Father, your daughter has come to see you. Father's cloudy eyes flickered, as if he wished to speak. Shen Qingyu stepped forward, attempting to pull me away. Yao, father needs quiet rest. I spun violently, the dagger in my sleeve flashing coldly as it pierced precisely into his heart. The smugness on Shen Qingyu's face froze instantly, morphing into disbelieving shock. He stared down at the dagger buried in his chest, then looked up at me. His lips trembled. Your Imperial Highness. I leaned close to his ear, my voice icy. You made me your plaything. I'll make you a lost soul. This throne, you couldn't hold it steady. I will. He crashed to the floor, eyes wide open, death refusing to close them. The palace attendants in the hall were frozen in terror, none daring to move. I produced a succession edict prepared long ago and presented it to my father. Father, I am now your only remaining blood relative. He began coughing violently, his trembling finger pointing at me as if he wished to speak. Yet in the end, he let his hand fall limply. He knew he had no other choice. Half a month later, my father passed away. Holding the edict, I ascended the throne as empress, protected by Lu Xuanzheng and the elite guards of Blackwind Fort. I became the first female ruler since the founding of the Great Qing dynasty. I executed the strategy the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the sparrow behind to perfection. At the beginning of my reign, the court and the realm were in turmoil, with many ministers refusing to submit. Internally, remnants of the previous dynasty and various factions were stirring restlessly. Externally, frontier tribes, hearing of the Great Qing's internal strife, sought opportunities to harass our borders. But I was prepared. I exploited the contradictions between the various factions, dividing and co-opting them, provoking them into fighting amongst themselves. Just when they all believed they could manipulate this woman, I had secretly laid out my chessboard. Lu Xuancheng's troops were like the sharpest blades. Under my precise command, they repeatedly crushed internal rebellions and external invasions. Within half a year, I reorganized the court with lightning speed. I purged all disruptive forces. Some were executed, others demoted. I promoted a cohort of loyal scholars and generals from humble backgrounds. The court's atmosphere was thoroughly cleansed. Once the court was preliminarily stabilized and all was renewed, my first major act was to formally confer upon Lu Xuancheng the title of Grand General, protecting the nation with the highest honors, elevating him to the rank of first-class duke. Simultaneously, I held a grand ceremony to formally install him as imperial consort. That night, the palace resounded with feasts and universal celebration. Within the bedchamber, crimson candles flickered. It felt like that first night in the Blackwind Fortress, our wedding chamber aglow with candles. Lu Xuancheng wore the elaborate, splendid robes of the imperial consort. After a few sips of wine, his eyes glowed slightly red, adding a touch of languid beauty to his features. He dismissed the attendants and pulled me into his embrace. His chin rested in the hollow of my neck as he murmured hoarsely, "Your Majesty now rules the realm, your might reverberating across the land. In time, this palace may welcome more confidants to ease the emperor's cares and lift his spirits." Watching his jealous expression, I couldn't help but laugh. My fingertips traced the exposed expanse of his chest, drifting downward. "What? Has the Protector General grown fearful?" I arched an eyebrow, deliberately teasing him. He seized my mischievous hand, his gaze darkening. "Indeed. This servant fears he might fail to serve His Majesty adequately." I shoved him forcefully, pinning him back onto the broad dragon-embroidered bed. The intricate dragon robes tangled with the imperial consort's ceremonial attire. Straddling his waist, I leaned down. "Lu Xuancheng, as long as this part of you stays firm, I will be yours alone for all eternity." My hand slid downward, precisely pressing against the already awakened, burning heat within him. Before my words finished, he violently flipped me onto my back. Fiery kisses rained down like a storm, carrying the scent of wine and long-suppressed desire. They instantly stole my breath. "Then I fear I must disappoint your Majesty. This part of me cannot soften in your Majesty's presence." Candlelight flickered, rising and falling. The room was filled with springtime passion, shaming the moonlight. Outside the window, the Milky Way shone brilliantly. This night of the first year of Fenlin had only just begun. My era was also slowly unfolding its magnificent scroll. The story ends here. Thank you for watching. The next chapter will be even more thrilling.